right, it's a Tuesday and I have my handbag back now.
The dressing is complete.
Oh yeah, the dressing is complete. And I hope in the handbag there is biscuits,
chocolate,
sweets.
whatever
and,
you want.
Fine. Because that is what makes us say ma, oyoyo, right? When we used to say that when we were growing up. Good morning and thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Right, we are streaming live on YouTube, and you can connect with us on Twitter using the hashtag TVC Breakfast.
All right, let's begin with the news right now. President Buhari says that he will move to make the police and the judiciary more efficient.
He said this today's inauguration in an interview granted to the Nigerian Television Authority.
I will try to make the police and the judiciary much more efficient. As I told the police and told a lot of people, the police are in the front line. As I said, there is no town where we don't get a police station. They are supposed to be the front line for law and order. The only thing closer to the people than the police are the neighborhood itself. Well, I don't know what you make of me, but if you...
But you're going to be more ruthless.
Well, all those who call me Baba go slow, they will see whether I'm slow or fast.
What does that mean, sir?
It means that I will persuade the police and the judiciary to be hard. And where I uncover that they are not hard, I will try and trace who is responsible for the slowness in terms of commanders of police from DPOs upwards.
President Buhari also rated the leadership of the National Assembly on patriotism.
I think a culture was developed in the National Assembly that they should dictate the terms. I think which was wrong. It is the executive that dictates the terms and take it before the legislature that will examine it and agree or disagree with it. But when they go around posing that they are the government and not the executive, then that's a problem. And I'm afraid I felt that, and I spoke personally to the Senate President, Saraki, and the leader of the House, Dogara. They could not deny it. I told them, how do they feel to hold the country at ransom for 7 months without passing a budget? So for 7 months, were they thinking, I said, personally, they are not hurting me, they are hurting the country.
But about the cabinet, the president said he has not identified whom to remove, but is willing to be notified about ministers who are corrupt. He said his administration will focus on improving infrastructure.
The 2019 budget was presented by President Muhammadu Buhari to the joint session of the National Assembly on December 18, 2018. The Senate passed the bill on April 30, 2019. This signing comes 2 days to the inauguration of President Buhari for a second term. Last month, the Senate and the lower house unanimously raised the budget from 8.826 trillion naira to 8.916 trillion naira. The amount approved by the National Assembly is 90 billion naira higher than the 8.826 trillion naira the president laid before the lawmakers in 2018. In the upgraded budget, the National Assembly allocated the sum of 2.094 trillion naira to capital expenditure. Recurrent expenditure got 4.055 trillion naira. Statutory transfer 502 billion naira. Fiscal deficit was raised to 1.908 trillion naira, that is 1.37%. Special intervention fund of 500 billion naira and deficit to the gross domestic product of 1.37%.
This is an increase of 90.33 billion naira over our submission. This increase reflects changes introduced by the National Assembly. In some areas, expenses we proposed were reduced, while in other areas they were increased. There were also certain areas where new additions were introduced into the budget. More details of the approved budget will be provided by the Honorable Minister of Budget and the National Planning.
The 2019 budget proposal is also premised on the following assumptions: oil benchmark at $60 per barrel, oil production at 2.3 million barrels per day, exchange rate at 305 naira to a dollar, inflation rate at 9.98%, oil revenue 3.73 trillion naira, non-oil revenue and other sources 1.39 trillion naira. Minister of Budget and National Planning Udo Udoma explains that details of the signed budget will be made available during the public presentation of the document on Tuesday, 28 May. Tolulokpe Ogunjobi, TVC News, Lagos.
Well, a business consultant, Viviane, joins me now to talk more on this. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Hi.
Now, the president has, implemented, or rather, the budget has been passed. Now, what do you expect following this 8.9 trillion naira? But the president seemed to have some concerns, especially with the increment made by the National Assembly.
We have to go back to the Constitution to be able to see how all this plays out. The truth is that the Constitution does give the National Assembly some leeway in amending the budget to reflect even development across Nigeria and some other clauses that were added. So, every year we go through this. It's almost become like a ritual. The budget is sent by the executive to the National Assembly. The National Assembly makes amendments and sends it back, and then an appropriation bill gets passed. The thing is, the Constitution gives them quite some leeway on budget amendments.
But the president has said that would make it, or that could make the budget difficult to implement on the long run.
Well, look, because of the Constitution again, the executive cannot, or should not expect that they, put forward a budget and then it's passed as it was put forward. Because again, the Constitution does give this National Assembly some leeway in amending the budget. So even when the executive is planning the budget, they have to bear that in mind, that it could get amended and then be able to see how, based on past trends, they can mitigate the effects of whatever amendments that are made. And that's the truth. The thing is, because of the balance of power principle enshrined in the Constitution, you can't ram down this thing down, the National Assembly without expecting some amendments.
Now, when you look at the breakdown of the budget, look at what is allocated to capital expenditure, what do you expect?
Well, I think about 2.2 trillion was allocated to 2.4 trillion was allocated to capital expenditure. I always say this. These budgets look very nice when they're presented, but then, yes, they look very nice. However, the issues or the devil is in the details and the implementation. If you look at the budget itself, a budget is supposed to show you inflows vis-a-vis outflows. How much money are you getting in and how do you plan on spending the money? How much money are we getting in? It's I think 50% of the revenue on that budget is based on oil, based on price of $60 per barrel. Okay, fine. You could say because it's been ranging between $61 and $66, it looks possible. However, 2.3 million barrels per day, is it really possible?
Realistic?
Is it really realistic? So in the end, even that 2.4 trillion that's been budgeted for capital expenditure, it can only work if you actually get those monies.
How about the Special Intervention Fund? The wife of the president raised some concerns recently. 500
billion.
Yeah.
She said that they've not seen the impact. The problem about intervention funds that are targeting the poor is that it is subject to so much distortion. The initial good intentions behind it, at times, no matter how well-intentioned those policies are, might not be able to achieve a lot of the intended effects. You have human beings, who have to administer those funds. And between, your plans and the money is actually getting to where they're supposed to get to. And I'm not talking corruption here. I'm even talking about pure administrative, logistic details. A lot could happen.
Viviane, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Moving ahead now, President Buhari has signed the 2019 appropriation bill into law.
This assent officially marks the commencement of the 2019 fiscal year. Well, business consultant Vivian Ani joins me now to talk more on this. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Good to see
morning.
you. Good morning. Now, since 1999, the legislature, whenever the budget is sent to them, never returns the budget the same way it got to them, but then certain adjustments have to be made. But then it seems yearly there seems to be a challenge for the president, that's President Muhammadu Buhari, which some have raised concerns that he shouldn't have expect that the budget will remain the same whenever this is done. Yes,
it's a democracy, and in our constitution, the lawmakers are allowed to make amendments to reflect national spread and some other considerations. So it's not just in Nigeria the budget's a problem. I mean, we've heard about budget shutdowns even in the United States, which is a much older democracy than Nigeria. I think it is not left for the executive to factor in the issues, that this budget we're sending to the National Assembly will definitely not come back the way we sent it. Don't forget, it's called an appropriation bill. Yeah. And a bill really is law. And the National Assembly have every right to amend laws and shape them to reflect certain concerns. So it's completely in order as long as...
Some persons have said if this issue continues to drag, perhaps the courts should come in.
No, the Constitution is clear. It's not as if there's ambiguity, you know what I mean. The courts come in when you are not quite sure of the interpretation. But the Constitution is very clear about this, that the National Assembly, it is within their powers to amend budgets to reflect national spread. And to, it gives a caveat, of course. It gives conditions for amending budgets that to reflect spread, best interest of the nation and the normal clauses. So for this thing to come as a surprise to any executive, including the present executive, it's a bit surprising because it's there in the Constitution.
All right, further breakdown of the budget will be made, available later today. What are expectations?
My expectations are that we move beyond annual ritual of budget presentations and look more into implementation and budget achievements, not just budget achievements on the spending side, but also budget achievements on the revenue side, meaning that whatever revenue projections you put out there must be based on reality, not on wishes.
Really?
Yes.
So on the aspect of education and perhaps in terms of health and all of that, what do you expect?
We all know that we're yet to see a budget in Nigeria that reflects the urgency we need to pay to those two sectors. If you talk about education has, all over the world, has moved beyond academic paper qualifications. We're now talking about skills. Skills, what value can you actually bring to productivity and to the companies where you work? There's a serious skills gap in Nigeria. I'm not saying paper qualifications, there's a big difference between the two, but skills, how people can actually translate knowledge into productivity is a serious problem in Nigeria. So education within any budget has never addressed that.
All right, Vivian Ani, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you.
About the cabinet, the president said he has not identified whom to remove, but is willing to be notified about ministers who are corrupt. He said his administration will focus on improving infrastructure.
And the next story now contains flash photography. President Buhari has signed the 2019 appropriation bill into law.
This assent officially marks the commencement of the 2019 fiscal year. Tululokpe Ogunjobi has details.
The 2019 budget was presented by President Muhammadu Buhari to the joint session of the National Assembly on December 18, 2018. The Senate passed the bill on April 30, 2019. This signing comes 2 days to the inauguration of President Buhari for a second term. Last month, the Senate and the lower house unanimously raised the budget from 8.826 trillion naira to 8.916 trillion naira. The amount approved by the National Assembly is 90 billion naira higher than the 8.826 trillion naira the president laid before the lawmakers in 2018. In the upgraded budget, the National Assembly allocated the sum of 2.094 trillion naira to capital expenditure. Recurrent expenditure got 4.055 trillion naira. Statutory transfer 502 billion naira. Fiscal deficit was raised to 1.908 trillion naira, that is 1.37%. Special intervention fund of 500 billion naira and deficit to the gross domestic product of 1.37%.
This is an increase of 90.33 billion naira over our submission. This increase reflects changes introduced by the National Assembly. In some areas, expenses we proposed were reduced, while in other areas they were increased. There were also certain areas where new additions were introduced into the budget. More details of the approved budget will be provided by the Honorable Minister of Budget and the National Planning.
The 2019 budget proposal is also premised on the following assumptions: oil benchmark at $60 per barrel, oil production at 2.3 million barrels per day, exchange rate at 305 naira to a dollar, inflation rate at 9.98%, oil revenue 3.73 trillion naira, non-oil revenue and other sources 1.39 trillion naira. Minister of Budget and National Planning Udo Udoma explains that details of the signed budget will be made available during the public presentation of the document on Tuesday, 28 May. Tolulope Ogunjobi, TVC News, Lagos.
And I have joining me now a business consultant, Vivian Ani, here in the studio. Vivian, good morning.
Hi, good
It's
morning.
really nice to see you.
Yeah,
you have
always
been
nice.
keeping an eye on the budget, and I know you know all the numbers when it comes to all of those, moving it here, moving it there.
Yeah.
But let us, before we even look at the 2019 budget, let us look at 2018 budget.
Okay.
Just a few months ago, the Director General of Budget Office said that they have recorded about 75% implementation rate of the 2018 budget. What's your take on that?
That doesn't tell the full story.
Oh, really?
75%, yes, implementation on capital expenditure.
Okay.
And I think the president said as December, when he was presenting the budget in front of the National Assembly, that they were only able to achieve 53% of revenue on the 2018 budget. So what does that tell you? You were able to spend 75% of what you projected to spend on capital expenditure, but you only got 53% of what you thought you would get to fund the budget overall. So
there's a lot of deficit there.
Precisely.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't tell the full story.
But it was the same period of time we had the Federal Inland Revenue Service, saying that they were able to generate about 5 trillion naira.
Yes.
It was a same period of time. The customs rating about a trillion plus something, and so on. If you put all of that together, isn't that almost the entire budget of 9 trillion?
You know, the problem is that, when you read these things in the media in piecemeal, it gives you now expect that the final figures should reflect this piecemeal news that we get. And I'm always shocked that when I hear 5 trillion, I hear 9 trillion, I hear this. And in the end, they now say we didn't meet our performance when it comes to raising revenue. And you now start to ask yourself, what exactly happened? Was it that some of the monies that came in for 2018 were really monies that should have come in 2017? Okay. Because the numbers a lot of times don't add up. So I'm asking questions too. What's going on?
All right, but let's look at the 2019 budget. The point there is it has about 4 trillion naira for recurrent expenditure, about 2 trillion naira for capital expenditure. We are still maintaining the recurrent expenditure even more than the capital that we are supposed to use as foundation for building.
Yes, and what should even worry you more is that I think in 2018 or 2017, I'm not quite sure, we overshot our estimates for recurrent expenditure, but did not meet up for our estimates for capital expenditure. So that should worry you more than anything else, meaning that the monies that we really are not investing in anything to make life better, we overperformed. And then the monies that we're supposed to invest to make life better by way of capital expenditure, we underperformed. So that should worry you a lot more.
So going into the new fiscal year has started so far since the president has signed it. You're not hopeful? Is that what it is?
It's not that I'm not hopeful. Look, to be honest, Mike, I worry. In a lot of countries, to avoid this starting budgets in June, kind of problem. The Constitution has enshrined timelines for performance, for budget presentations.
Which Nigeria was trying to, bring back
In
from
the
the
Nigerian
January to December
in the Nigerian
calendar year.
Constitution, it just says that the president must present the budget before the last day of the preceding fiscal year. So really what it means is that you can present a budget on the 31st of December, but the National Assembly still has to do a lot of work on the budget. So what some countries have done, and I'm not quite sure, but I think what the United States has done is that they've said by June, the budget has to be presented in the preceding year. So can you imagine if a budget is presented in front of the National Assembly, budget for 2019, you present it in June 2018. There's no way that by January you would not have reached some critical milestones as per appropriation bills.
Okay, fine. Before I let you go now, if you were in the position to say, okay, Mr. President, let's do this and do this and do that, what would you think he should drive as priority for this next budget?
For this next budget,
Yes.
on capital expenditure.
Yes.
What he should drive as priority is the reskilling of the Nigerian labor force.
Okay.
Both new entrants and existing entrants. And why do I say he should drive reskilling? Look, all these budgets, 2-point-something trillion on capital expenditure, roads, I'm not saying it is not good, but to truly unleash productivity in Nigeria. And once you unleash productivity, it's a multiplier effect. Taxes, income taxes, payroll state taxes and stuff.
A lot of things take care of themselves.
If you ask the average employer, try advertising for certain jobs in Nigeria and see, even with the big unemployment numbers, whether you can get people to do those kind of jobs.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a big food for thought there. Vivian Ani, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
coming.
so much, Mike. It's always my pleasure.
Thank you very much.